Hey everyone, and welcome to the season finale of AWS Nordics Office Hours with me, Gunnar Grosch. So since this is the last episode of the season, it's a special one. I don't have one guest on. I don't have two guests on. I have 6 guests on this time. 6 AWS experts to answer any questions you might have about AWS. So we're going to get to it. We want you, the viewers, to ask your questions. Just post them in the chat. We've also sourced a few questions ahead of time. So we have both questions that you've posted to us before and questions that you're going to post in the chat throughout the streams. So we're going to do a quick round of introduction so that you know who our experts on the panel is. So starting with the man next to me, Alexander, perhaps. Just a quick intro.
Yeah, good afternoon. So Alexander Dragunov, work as a partner solutions architect at AWS and specialized in Microsoft and Windows workloads on AWS. So if you have any questions on running SQL, Active Directory, .NET on AWS, so that's me.
All right. Welcome back, Alexander. This is your 4th time, perhaps, is it?
Yep.
Next, we have Vidya. Welcome, Vidya.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Vidya Sanjeevi, and I work as a customer optimization and enablement specialist. So anything with regards to cost optimization in AWS, I'm the go-to person for that. So please feel free to ask any questions about that. And this will be my first time, so I'm very excited.
Welcome. And next, then we go to Sini. Welcome, Sini. 3rd time.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me again. So I'm Sini Tinfors. I'm a startup solutions architect. I'm based in Stockholm. So I'm helping our Nordic startup customers building on AWS.
Welcome, Sini. And then Toni, first time participant.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Toni Syvänen. I'm a game tech solutions architect working closely with the game tech customers in the Nordics. And I'm also, as you can maybe see from the background, networking expert in AWS. So anything related to our load balancers or VPCs and so on, I'm the expert on that area as well.
Welcome, Toni. Next, we have Ulf.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ulf Zakariasson. I work as a business development manager, primarily for storage, which also, of course, includes topics like backups and those things. So storage is my specialty.
And then finally, we have Vikesh. Is it your 2nd time on, Vikesh?
Yes, you're correct.
Right.
So yeah, myself, Vikesh, and I work as a machine learning specialist, solutions architect. I'm also based out of Stockholm office. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me for any machine learning specific questions. Thanks.
All right, so that is our panel of experts for this Ask Us Anything session on AWS Nordics Office Hours. And we're going to get to it. So we're going to start off with one of the questions we got sent to us ahead of this session. And this is it. So a customer is running an Express application on EC2 instances in autoscaling and uses ESF for shared storage. What would be the migration path for going to containers? So let's start with the EFS part, and that is your area of expertise, Ulf.
Yes, a perfect solution to migrate file storage is actually data sync, which is a service we've been having at AWS for more than 2 years now, I think. It's like rsync on steroids. So it's optimized network-wise and in other ways. So it probably has the performance needed in cases like this. So data sync is one obvious way to do it online for the storage parts.
And that means that you're able to then move the storage from one place to another. But what if the customer wants to use or not change, use EFS both for instances and then for containers? Does he need to make any changes then?
I don't think so.
You could basically just start using it with containers instead then.
Yes.
We had a session earlier this year about using persistent storage with modern applications, containers, and AWS Lambda. So I'll find the link to that episode and post it in the chat as well. And then we have the migration for the containers. Is anyone up to answering that? Alexander.
Yeah, so as you probably know, we have a tool called up-to-container, and I thought we can use it here, but unfortunately, Express application means that it's application written in Node.js, and up-to-container doesn't support it because it only supports .NET and Java applications. So we don't have any tool which will magically help you, but because it's already Node.js application, so you don't need to refactor or do like any code changes for this application. So meaning that your Node.js application, which runs on EC2 instance, can run in container as well, because most probably it's Linux based. So I was thinking that for migration path, maybe the easiest way to start with containers maybe is to use CDK and to use our patterns for container-based applications, where you just create. So the only thing you need to do is to move application to container, and then with CDK it will deploy like best practice network with your Elastic Container Service with like all task definitions. So it will be few lines of code, and your container will be up and running in ECS using all the best practices for security and everything. So maybe this could be a way.
And I think you show that in the episode where you were on talking about CDK, but in that time it was for a .NET application. You could basically use the same approach, but for this Express application instead then.
Yeah, I would say so.
That's cool. All right. So if anyone else has anything to add, otherwise let's move on to the second question. And if you, the viewer,
quickly one just to tie those two things together, it's like as using EFS, you can use it with our Elastic Container Service ECS and with EKS, the Elastic Kubernetes Service as well. So from the persistent data point of view, you can mount the same file system if you need to in both runtime orchestrations as well. So as soon as you get the application containerized, both of our runtime orchestrations will support EFS as well. So it should be, from the persistent point of view, kind of easy. It's more of then choosing how you containerize and how you manage that, like, for example, using CDKs to manage that.
Right. All right. That's great. Then I think next question is for you, Toni. So you don't even have to mute yourself. And this question is perhaps more about customers that are using game tech on AWS. Are most gaming customers running on instances?
Not actually. We actually have quite a many different ways of running. So we have customers who are, of course, using just typical EC2 instances, but it then means that they have to create the orchestration and the management of them themselves. We have quite a lot of customers who are also looking at containers, so using ECS or EKS to do the orchestration of getting the game servers to run. And then there's a lot of customers actually also looking at our game tech specific service called GameLift, which is a really fully managed service for hosting game servers. So it's the session-based game servers for your, for example, multiplayer game. And there you would just make a headless version of your game and put it into a zip file and give it to us. And we will make sure that we help you to launch a global fleet. So that's a typical way to run the game servers themselves when it's session-based game servers. Then, of course, the other part of this is that game backend services. So your matchmaking, your scoreboard, your inventory, and the other services. Then it's a typical web-based application, really. So it's even serverless backends are being deployed by our customers, that they run all these like supporting services for clan, matchmaking, even chat, running them as a serverless architecture completely. So it's not just running on instances. I guess that's the more familiar with more established companies, because that's how you used to run it on-prem as well. So it's easy to migrate. But I would say that if you start today, do take a look at GameLift, because that's the most easiest way to get started. You don't have to think about how you orchestrate, and it's fully managed. And if you then need to get some more control on, you do something unique on matchmaking, for example, then look at containers if you started today. And yeah, don't forget about running on instances. It's still an option, but it does then require a lot of more work from you to create the whole backend and orchestration.
So basically, the answer is as we tend to come back to here. It depends. It depends on the use case.
It really depends on your needs, and are you a big studio who can build their own engine to run the whole thing, or are you just a startup and you want to concentrate on actually testing the game features? Then I would say go with GameLive, because then you don't need to think about how do I actually get these hundreds of servers around the world up and running fast.
All right, great. Next question then is for Vidya, I'd say. We're using Spot instances for most of our compute, and they never seem to shut down unexpectedly. How confident can we be in Spot instances staying up?
That's a very good question. So Spot is recommended for instances that are not mission critical, that can tolerate fault. So you have to think about that when you're building and when you're choosing what type of savings options you're going to go for. If you want a stable workload, then I would suggest a savings plans or a reserved instance where you're actually reserving that compute capacity. Whereas for Spot, the way that it's built, it is for more unpredictable workloads that it should be fine if it goes down for a few minutes or even a few hours.
And what is the benefit with Spot for people that is unfamiliar with it?
The benefit with Spot is probably number one is the discount. It provides the absolute highest discount, but that comes with the price, and the price is the stability and availability of the instance.
Right. And what is are there any other ways of getting a discount without using Spot, without having that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The number one would probably for EC2 would be savings plans, where it's super flexible. You basically just commit to a compute capacity. So let's say your average bill is $2,000 a month on EC2. You would divide that by how many hours there are in a month. And maybe your average would be then $20 an hour is what you're spending on compute. So what the savings plan is that you commit a certain amount of that $20, saying that I promise that for the next year, I'm going to be using $10 an hour on compute. And thereby you would get a discount for that.
So for this customer, then perhaps looking at savings plans for certain workloads, the ones that really need to stay up, could be a better choice to make sure that it is predictable.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. And next, then, we have a question from the chat. I have a web scrape application. I tried to use the Lambda function, but I had a difficult because my file is biggest. Now I'm using EC2 with Linux and a Python file. What's the best service in this case? So should we start with Sini, perhaps, about Lambda functions?
Sure. Thanks, Gunnar. Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of serverless and absolute Lambda functions in general. So I would absolutely suggest to really figure out if it's not possible to use Lambda functions. And I'm kind of thinking that the big file layer, could that potentially be the size of the code package? And if that's the case, then I'm thinking that I believe it was a few months back at the Pastor event, we actually launched the capability to now run your container images as a Lambda function. And this allows actually for your container image code package size to be 10 gigabytes. So that I would first look into, would that be possible? Okay. 35 megabytes. If that's the answer, then the zipped one, just looking at the regular Lambda deployment package size, is 50 megabytes. A zip one for direct upload. So that should be possible, just if it's the deployment package size. So I would very much suggest to reconsider Lambda. And since it's so nice to only pay for when your function is actually being invoked, and not having that instance up and running all the time.
Looking at this use case, web scrape application, it doesn't sound like something that's running continuously. And so perhaps you don't need to have an EC2 instance running or even containers running. Instead, you can use Lambda function. So with either trying to get if it's 35 megabyte, it should be possible to have that as a zip file. Otherwise, look at the container deployment option. It's not running containers on AWS Lambda. It is a way of deploying your Lambda functions. All right. So next, then, we have just having trouble switching back and forth here. There we go. This is a question for Vikesh. I use SageMaker a lot. When should I start thinking about using pipelines? So first, a brief of SageMaker, then a brief of pipelines, Vikesh.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So SageMaker is basically a managed machine learning service we have. And the idea behind SageMaker is that we want customers to run their complete end-to-end machine learning lifecycle without leaving the SageMaker platform at all. So whether it is data collection, training, pre-processing, feature engineering, training, tuning, deployment, inference, monitoring, MLOps, pipelines, you can model registry, feature store, whatever you want to do within the scope of the machine learning lifecycle, you should be able to do all of that by getting a sort of a unified experience using SageMaker. So that's sort of the value prop we try to offer with SageMaker. Now, coming back to the question, I don't exactly mean what you mean by using SageMaker a lot. Do you use it only for data science and exploration part, or you use it for the complete machine learning lifecycle or the training workflow you have? But when should you start thinking about pipelines? Is I would say the moment you hit production. I think that should be the easiest answer, because once you have a model running in production, you will have to think about ways to track the performance of the model and then retrain the model. And the moment you talk about monitoring the model and retraining the model, the whole ML ops aspect starts coming into the picture, where you need to build a sort of an automated pipeline, sort of a retraining pipeline. And then you also need to think about the whole governance aspect, because simply implementing pipelines is not going to fly. You need to have a better governance structure around who does what, while you actually try to orchestrate the whole machine learning pipeline. So short answer is, the moment you hit production, you should start thinking about this, how to build pipelines. And we have capabilities within SageMaker which can help you use and build the pipelines. We have the SageMaker pipelines APIs, which you can use to build and orchestrate your machine learning workflow. Then we have SageMaker projects, which can help you build sort of a template, a CI/CD template, which can automate the complete machine learning lifecycle.
You mentioned CI/CD there, and the entire answer to that question sounds to me very much like the way we've talked about CI/CD for deploying code into production or to other stages.
It's slightly different because when we talk about ML ops in specific, it's basically sort of a 3-layered approach. So in the first part, you just focus on building your training workflow. I'll not call it as pipeline. It's just a simple workflow, a stateful workflow, where you train, pre-process, and tune, and then you maybe register the model to a model registry. That's where your training workflow ends. And then comes the second part, where you try to hook this workflow into a CI/CD pipeline. So that's where the CI/CD part comes into picture. And then comes the third layer, where you start building the governance model around it. Maybe you need a multi-account structure where your models should be migrated from the dev account to a prod account through a centralized model registry. So you have to. So it's sort of a multi-layered approach. I always suggest to customers whenever we are thinking about implementing MLOps.
All right. Thank you for that, Vikesh. So if you just joined us, this is the AWS Nordics office hours. I am joined today by 6 AWS experts to answer any questions you might have. And we've talked, about pretty much areas is it for everyone so far? I think so. And maybe Alexander is missing some .NET questions, but we'll probably get those as well. if you have any questions, just post them in the chat. We're also having questions that people have sent to us ahead of the episode. So if you're confused at why we're talking about things that doesn't show up in the chat for you. All right, so the next question then, we have it here. Oh, this is one for Alexander, so now he should be happy. With CDK, CloudFormation, SAM, and probably some others, we're struggling with choosing a path, and right now we're using all three. Can you give any pointers on when to use what? Is it okay to mix? I know what your preference is, Alexander, so you can start, and maybe someone else will add on later on.
Yeah, no, like my personal preference is to use CDK. So if you start maybe greenfield project, so why not to start with CDK, because you can use all the high level constructs, so you will write less code and yeah, you will be more effective. But if you have existing project with a lot of CloudFormation templates which you already create, you can easily mix like CDK with CloudFormation. So from inside CDK you can reuse existing CloudFormation templates and probably keep it like this, or gradually, if you need to make changes to these templates, maybe gradually you will move to CDK at some point. So that's
for people who might be unaware about these different terms, what is the main difference between AWS CDK and CloudFormation?
So so CloudFormation, it's a way for you to define your infrastructure in declarative way using either JSON templates or YAML templates. So you will write a lot of YAML code which defines your infrastructure. And with CDK, you can define your infrastructure using programming languages such as TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, .NET, Java, Go. So you can be much more productive not writing these YAML files, but writing your code in the language which you normally use. So you can use, I don't know, classes, if statements, loops. You can package your reusable pieces of infrastructure into, I don't know, NuGet packages or NPM packages. So, and under the hood, CDK still uses CloudFormation. So when you compile your CDK project, under the hood, it will generate CloudFormation template, and then CloudFormation engine will deploy this template. So that's in short what it is.
All right. Anyone wants to add anything to that answer? No? All right. I just want to say that AWS SAM is great if you're working with pure serverless applications using Lambda and the other perhaps serverless services. So using AWS SAM is a great way to use infrastructure as code with serverless applications as well. That's just my opinion. All right. So next question then. This is perhaps something for Sini. Why would I use GraphQL APIs instead of REST APIs?
Oh, yeah. More serverless questions. Love that. So GraphQL API. So GraphQL is a type of API which allows you to sort of query for only the pieces of information that you want, which and it also, you can also subscribe to mutations in your data sources, and this makes GraphQL a bit more. I would say almost it can be more flexible, I would say. So, for example, if you have a mobile client, which where you have where you really want to optimize, you don't want to get all of the data in a request, which you might get from a REST API. You can really only get only the pieces of information that you really need. And so when you need to performance optimize, and we have when you want really fast updates to changes in your data source, then I would look towards using a GraphQL API versus a REST API.
So let's talk AWS services then. For GraphQL, the service of choice is?
AWS AppSync is it's a fully managed service which hosts GraphQL APIs.
And then for REST APIs, instead, it's API Gateway. Right. So just a follow-up question then. If you have different type of data sources, is that a common use case for GraphQL? So you're fetching data from different data sources within the same API?
Exactly. That's so. Yes, that's absolutely right. So I would. I actually had an interesting discussion regarding exactly this question a few weeks back, and I think we kind of settled for if you're already have an existing REST API in place, you're, for example, migrating to AWS, absolutely might make sense to continue doing that as part of migration. But if you're starting out from scratch, I would absolutely evaluate your use cases and whether a GraphQL API might actually make more sense for you if you don't have anything when you're starting out.
And your latest session on this show was about Amplify. Amplify, then, does it prefer GraphQL, or how would you put that?
No, I would say no, both are supported, and it's when you're setting up your new web or mobile application with Amplify, then you get asked which type of API would you prefer, and then it supports both. But however, I should also say that I think in my session here last time, then I did talk about Amplify Data Store, and that actually and that's a feature to interact with data in your application, and from a developer user perspective, feels like you're just interacting with data locally in the app. That's that simple, but the Amplify Data Store actually sets up a GraphQL API in the backend. So in that sense, maybe Amplify does sort of push users to GraphQL.
All right. So next, then, we have a question on, well, more or less the same topic. Which is from Denis in the chat. Should you use AppSync or API Gateway with DynamoDB? So DynamoDB is the downstream data source in that case. But based on your question, or your answer right now, I suppose the answer is it depends, once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it absolutely depends on the use case. Both, you can absolutely use DynamoDB with both API Gateway and also with AWS AppSync.
And the way you would set it up also depends on if you just want to transport data from DynamoDB or if you want to transform data. So if you need to add Lambda functions, for instance, in between, or if it's just transporting data using VTLs, I guess, in API Gateway. Right. Okay, so next question then. Let's see who's able to answer that. I have a website in EC2 with Bitnami WordPress image. All services, database and files is inside this EC2. Is it more performative to separate the services? So this is a bit of architecture and a bit of application design, I guess. And a bit about reliability perhaps as well. So what would happen if this EC2 instance goes down? Anyone want to jump in to talk a bit about how you would think about perhaps splitting this up? Silence from the experts. So I guess it's my turn to jump in then. Toni? Sini is pointing to Toni.
Yeah, I can take a little bit at least on it. So in here, because you have all the components of the WordPress are in the same machine, it is quite nice, of course, to get started with. But if this site would start growing, and as you said, if this one EC2 instance would go down or something happens to it, then you are in a risk, like how to get up and running again. So at least I would look at moving the database into one of our managed services, like the Aurora database for MySQL or PostgreSQL, just to separate those two from each other, because then it allows you to also scale the WordPress application on its own, while the managed database could give you the automatic backups, for example, a lot easier way of getting them back up and running again if you need to recover something. Also, another point I would want to put here, as it's a WordPress, so it's most likely a blog or some kind of dynamic website, we'll also look to use our CDN CloudFront in front of this whole website as well. So a lot of the content most likely is cacheable, so you could speed up the website on its own, and also it optimizes the costs a little bit, because if it's the same image you reuse multiple times, the CloudFront then can help you with that as well. So it's not downloaded from the EC2 machine every time, but it gets downloaded from the CDN. For the files, it really depends on the WordPress plugin. Could it support, for example, EFS or some other shared file system there? But yeah, if the WordPress would become big, I would separate these three from each other. The database, the actual application of WordPress, and the files themselves, and then put a CDN in front. WordPress does actually, if I remember right, has a plugin for even S3. So if those files would be just pictures you're uploading, you could store them also on S3 instead of on the disk as well. So getting the benefit of the highly available S3 storage as well, our object storage.
There is a solution, or a starter solution for using a high availability WordPress solution on AWS. I'll post that in the chat. It's a far leap from just using a single EC2 instance. So think about, if you're using this, the cost is, of course, a fair bit higher, depending on what type of EC2 instance you're running today. But I'll post that in the chat. Next, we have some other questions. Let's see. This was a long one. So I want to get your thoughts. I have to allow a team to do database queries against databases which is in a private subnet. I don't want to use bastions or jump hosts. Don't want to deal with SSH keys and user management. What other solution except below to allow to run database queries? Good old vanilla SSH EC2 instance connect SSM session manager. Is this Toni question perhaps? Or Toni answer?
Yeah, so from the networking point of view, it depends where your team is situated in this. Because if they are, for example, on-prem and you have some VPN connectivity to your on-prem offices, I would then recommend just setting VPN connections up and allowing them to connect to your private database over those VPNs as well. I personally do use that session manager more and more myself nowadays. So that's another nice way to go about as well. But yeah, if it's on the networking level, I would look at setting up VPN connectivity, which would allow those employees then to get access to the database, even when it's running in a private VPC.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also a fan of using Sessions Manager these days instead of using bastions or jump hosts whenever I run EC2 things. Next, then there's a question that we received ahead of time. That's for Ulf. And sorry that you're almost out of picture now, Vikesh, when there's a long question. But this one is, nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry. There we go. What's the difference between GP2 and GP3? Why use GP2 today? Ulf.
Yes. Well, at the very end of 2020, AWS announced the availability of general purpose volume type 3, or GP3, and it's the next generation general purpose SSD volumes for EBS. And it actually enabled customers to provision performance independently of storage capacity. So you no longer really needs to, so to say, or buy more storage than you really need, due to the fact that you needed, so to say, the performance. So that's the key difference technically. You can actually, so to say, store performance, both IOPS and throughput are, so to say, independent from capacity. So why would you use GP2 today? I think, if you want to pay 20% more, then you should use GP2, because GP3 actually comes with a price reduction of in the range of 20%. And with the easiness of elastic volumes, it's super easy to actually to migrate to GP3. There shouldn't actually, there might be some corner cases where GP2 still is in favor of GP3, but I would say 99.99% of the cases you should actually migrate to GP3.
All right, so use the common sense to don't test in production, make the change in your staging or dev environments first, and make sure that everything runs as intended, and then switch over to GP3.
Yes.
All right, next we have, sorry Vikesh, another long question. So let's see. Oh, you're still there. We are migrating from on-prem Hadoop to AWS Redshift, Spectrum, and S3. We have daily delta load of 1 gigabyte and historical load of 1 terabyte. We're experiencing slowness in our data load process in comparison to Hadoop. We have 5-node cluster. So do we have any Redshift experts on, by the way? Maybe that was the question I should have started with. We don't. Oh my. So
no, but actually, so I've done a bit of I saw another comment to this question, and that is like to have a look at the new Redshift RA3 instance types, and to say a few words about these. They're quite different from the previous Redshift instance types in that the compute and storage layer are separated. So when you and this allows for, so before RA3 instances were available, many customers ended up having to add new instances to their cluster just because they were running out of the storage capabilities. And with but this is so not only would the RA3 instances allow customers only to add the number of cluster nodes they need, but then they can scale storage independently. And this storage and Redshift Managed Storage uses S3 underneath. And typically, customers see a huge performance increase by using RA3 instances. So in general, just not a Redshift specialist, but that's definitely where customers should look towards when they get started with Redshift nowadays.
All right, that's a great answer. So next, then, we have a question that, let's see who wants to. There we go. I found a bug in our streaming platform. Does it make sense to move all the workloads to Graviton 2, or do we have specific recommendations around this? And Graviton 2, to start things off, who want to say a few words about what Graviton 2 is? Vidya, do you want to jump in? Because I'd say that this could be a question for you.
Yes, absolutely. So Graviton 2 is our, I guess you would say, recently launched processors that are the first ever ARM-based instances on AWS. And they provide 40% better price than traditional, if you say, general purpose instances. So they're definitely something that customers should be looking into. Regarding the question, does it make sense to move all workloads to Graviton 2? I would say that, of course, with all questions, it depends on the situation and what application you're trying to move. In general, if you look at the managed services, with the managed services, it's usually just modifying the instance type and rebooting. But if it's not a managed service, then you do have to look to make sure that it is compatible.
And how would you do that? Is that trial and error on your own application? Just testing it?
That's a good question. Perhaps if I could have a solution architect support me on that.
So I can maybe pitch in a little bit. So for testing it, it really depends on looking, does your chosen engine like Java or Node.js, does it support ARM-based architectures, and start going from there, seeing, is it supported? Do you have all the libraries required on that architecture as well? Or if it's more or less your own code base, then just try to compile it. If it's something like C++ or something else, just try to compile it on the ARM architecture instead. So something like Java and Node.js most likely is quite easy to move to Graviton 2 and ARM, as those have a great support on it as well. But yeah, does require some work on testing it out, creating the new pipeline to make a new build and testing it out. And then comparing also, is it better performance as well once you have that build created as well. And as mentioned, on the managed service, something like our database services, it's just a click on the console to change the compute from x86 to ARM base on the Graviton 2 base. So it's quite easy to test it out on something like our databases as well.
Right. So if you just joined us, this is the AWS Nordics office hours. It's the season finale of the show. So we're doing an Ask Us Anything. I have 6 AWS experts on, and we're answering any questions you might have. And now then, let's look at this one. I think it's for Vikesh. How do I make the choice between pre-trained machine learning models and training my own?
Okay, and the answer basically starts with the same famous quote of a solution architect. Yeah, it would heavily depend upon the use case you're dealing with and actually what you're trying to do. We have a lot of pre-trained models available in different frameworks and libraries, model zoos, right? For example, if you take an ImageNet example of any pre-trained image model, then it is trained on a lot of stock images. Now, you need to ask this question to you and your team, is that what kind of images you're dealing with? I'm just taking an example. So, for example, if you have a use case which deals with very specific types of images, for example, I have customers who have images maybe from a construction line, or they have images from let's say a shipping business. So these are very specific lines of business, and if you want to do maybe anomaly detection or object detection or semantic segmentation or whatnot, then you need to make sure that your model understands the context of your line of business's images. So in that case, you will have to train your model to basically some sort of a transfer learning on your model, on the pre-trained model, to make it your own. Just change the weights and retrain your model. So the choice completely depends upon what exactly you are trying to use the model for. If it's a very general purpose use case, a pre-trained model will just do fine. But if it is anything which is specific to your line of business or the business problem you're trying to solve, then you have to do some sort of a transfer learning on it.
Right. So if you need a model that can recognize traffic signals, for instance, the thing we're all doing every time we're using CAPTCHA, then you could probably use a pre-trained model. But if you're producing something that you want to find anomalies in, then you would need to train your own model so that it can recognize how that specific item would look.
Yeah, if you want to detect apples and oranges in images, any pre-trained model will just do fine on that.
Okay, thank you for that. There was a question on, does Docker run on ARM? I don't have the answer for that. If anyone has.
It does.
Yes,
so,
it does.
So, yeah.
All right, that's great. There we have it. And next then, about Python data. How can I do integration with my Jupyter notebook with S3 in my account? I read about Boto3 library, but have another way. I believe that there are many ways.
I can take this on. One. So I think this, if you're in the same account where the data is sitting, and if you want to use a Jupyter hosted experience in the same account, then it's pretty straightforward to use SageMaker notebook instances or SageMaker Studio. Both of them provide native integration with S3, so there's no data movement required at all in that particular case. Now, thinking about what kind of SDK experience you want. So like you rightly mentioned, Boto3 is one of the options, which is the AWS SDK for Python, which does support all the SageMaker APIs. But to tell you a fact, if you're using SageMaker with Boto3, it provides you with tons of configuration options. So which makes the whole API calls a bit verbose sometimes. And that's why we also launched a SageMaker Python SDK, which is basically a SageMaker SDK specifically built for Python. And you can use that to write the same code, do the same API calls with less lines of code. So it's set with nice defaults and less configuration options so that the developer can just focus on the real business value they want to get out from the API. So broadly, two options, Boto3 and Python SDK. what you choose will depend upon what's your style of programming, I would say.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, there's a question on EventBridge. Is it possible to see the exact events in an EventBridge archive? I can only see the event count. I'm looking at Sini. You can't see that I'm looking at Sini, but I'm looking at Sini right now. No?
Yeah, and the answer, I mean, I know, of course, so EventBridge launched the capability to rerun events that's been archived. I actually don't know if you can see the exact events, so have to, yeah, don't know.
All right. Then let's move to the next question then. And this question is, let's try to avoid that bug again. Do it this way. This was a lot longer, but I just took out the question part. Is DynamoDB only for serverless applications? I think most of you can answer this.
No.
So who wants to go? No. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think we can probably talk about many use cases for DynamoDB here, but we're seeing DynamoDB being used by all sorts of applications today. Even if the compute is running on EC2 or containers or in AWS Lambda, DynamoDB is used, well, all over the place with all kinds of use cases. So short answer, I suppose, there. Then we have a question for Toni. Do you need to use GameLift or Lumberyard to build games on AWS?
No. So depending, of course, what do you mean here with building games? So building game servers, as I mentioned a bit earlier in this session, was that you're not required to use those two. So on GameLift, we do actually support also Unreal Engine and Unity Engine as well. So if you are building your game with those, you can still use GameLift. And you're not required to use Lumberyard. So Lumberyard is, of course, coming from the Amazon themselves. And yeah, that's pretty cool as well. But you're not limited to using just these two. And you could still use containers and EC2 instances even for games. And in this case, build games, it's like kind of bit wider area. Do we want to build games? So yeah. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I just wanted, can you please just give a quick brief of what GameLift and Lumberyard is? We don't talk that much about game tech. So
let's start with Lumberyard. So Lumberyard is Amazon's game engine that you can use to build your games. It's a bit like Unity game engine or Unreal Engine coming from Epic and Unity themselves. So Lumberyard is something Amazon is building on, and there are some large gaming companies out in the world who are building their games on Lumberyard. So yeah, it's another option you have in terms of starting to build new games. GameLift is then our fully managed game server hosting service. So when you want to create a multiplayer game, for example, where you have matchmaking and you need to place the same certain number of players on the same game session, then GameLift is an easy way to get started running that multiplayer game on AWS. So you just need to make a zip file out of your game, the multiplayer game engine, put it in the zip file, give it to GameLift, and then you can scale it into over 20 different regions around the world automatically. So say, I want this large cluster of servers as well. And also it has auto-scaling built in. So it really depends how many players are online playing. That's how the GameLift will then scale up and down your game servers.
Right. Thank you for that, Toni. And the next question is for Vidya, I'd say. Can I see a more granular view of data transfer costs?
Yes.
I'm guessing that is, from the AWS bill.
Yes. So the way to view your costs is to use AWS Cost Explorer. So what Cost Explorer does, it's basically a visualization tool, which takes everything from your AWS bill, but puts it in a very nice graphic view. And once you're in Cost Explorer, it's very easy to navigate around it. But specifically to look at data transfer costs, On the sidebar in Cost Explorer, you could choose one of the filters is usage type group. And when you go into that usage type group, you can basically just type in data transfer inter AZ, and you would be able to see all of your data transfer costs. And even better, you can even choose by region, by instance family, like if you can like even filter down even more to get the best granular view.
Okay, so let's see. We are 10 minutes from top of the hour. So if you have any questions, just post them in the chat for our experts to answer. I'm doing my best to copy paste a bit here in, in between answers. And the next question was, I can ask it without even pasting it, I think. This is definitely an Alexander question. Does AWS support .NET 5?
Yes, sure it does. And maybe the reason for asking this question is that .NET 5 is not long-term support version of .NET. So the previous long-term support version was .NET Core 3.1, and the next one will be .NET 6, which will be released this November, I think. So .NET 5 is not long-term support version, but if customers want to use it, they can do it. So they can do it on our EC2 instances. So we have EC2 AMI Amazon Machine images with .NET 5 pre-installed, so they can use these EMIs. Or also Elastic Beanstalk has .NET 5 on Linux out of a box as supported platform. And also if you want to use .NET 5 on Lambda, so you cannot use it as a managed runtime because it's not long-term support, but you can use .NET 5 as custom runtime, or you can use .NET 5 as a container, as containers running on Lambda. So we have ready to use container images for Lambda with .NET 5. So there are multiple ways for you how you can use it.
Okay.
And also we have AMIs with .NET 5 for Graviton. So you can use it on Graviton as well. So.
And that's also something you showed in the episode where we talked about .NET, I believe. Next, we have a question about testing, and specifically testing serverless applications. It's actually a three-part question, so I'm going to put up the first part. How do I test serverless applications? The second part is like AppSync, and the third part is with Lambdas and stuff. So, Sini.
Yep. No, this is it's a very common question for teams who are just getting started with developing serverless applications. And as much as I love everything serverless, testing can get a little bit, but you have to put a little bit of effort and thinking into testing and test strategy. And what we see many customers are successful is that they actually, or first of all, make use of infrastructure as code, such as transformation or SAM or CDK, which makes it really easy to spin up a new test environment, run your tests, and then you can just tear down that environment or even leave it because you're not paying anything when there are no requests running. So I would, as a general suggestion, early on, look into automating as much as you can. This will make your life a lot easier. But also, since one part of the question was actually AppSync there, I also want to mention that you can actually test your AppSync API in the AWS console. There you can make requests just while you're developing. That's super handy to do. So, but overall, infrastructure as code, automation, and actually have your test environment in AWS.
All right. And certain parts with the code, it's no different if it's serverless or if it's anything else, like doing unit tests and things like that. It's basically the same strategy. Thank you for that. Then we have a question maybe for Vikesh. I'd like to know how to use Keras Tuner for each layer in the DL model. I tried, but not very successful.
Okay, yeah. So first of all, so Keras Tuner, I mean, if you look at the requirements or dependencies for Keras Tuner, is basically TensorFlow 2.0 plus and Python 3.6 plus. And
Did you have that? Did you just know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is one of the Keras Tuner is one of the popular topics amongst customers as well. So
right. Go ahead.
So we have support for TensorFlow 2.x containers as well, and yes, we have Python 3.6 and 3.7 and 3.8 containers running on TensorFlow as well. And I'm talking about all of these containers as SageMaker's pre-built deep learning containers. So I am not sure if you're using those or one of those, but if you're using those, then it should work. But at the same time, I would also like to understand, why are you using Keras Tuner? If it's just for doing hyperparameter optimization, then also give a try to SageMaker's automatic model tuning, which pretty much does the same thing. And for example, it supports both Bayesian approaches and random approaches for optimizing your hyperparameters during the training. So you need to also ask this question: do you really need a Keras Tuner? Or if you're already running on SageMaker, then maybe SageMaker automatic model tuner will just do the job fine, or as good as Keras Tuner. But if you still want to use it, like I said, I don't see a challenge in terms of compatibility of the framework versions and the other dependencies versions. So it should work, in my understanding.
There's a follow-up, not on SageMaker.
Okay, then I don't know what exactly how you're building your TensorFlow container. So it's a bit of SageMaker / AWS agnostic question. If you talk about in general, how to use Keras Tuner, I think the documentation, I played around with it around a couple of weeks back, actually. So I was able to tune a very simple object detection model with it, but I was using AWS managed TensorFlow container to run this. So I am not sure how you're building the container. Maybe that's where the culprit is, or maybe your inference stack.
All right. Very happy to have you on the show, Vikesh, because that's what's way out of my comfort zone. Next, then, there's a very generic question, I'd say. Does AWS support IPv6? Toni?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah. So yeah, currently we do support IPv6 on many of our services. So first of all, IPv6 being the new version of the Internet protocol, while we're running out of IPv4 addresses, which is the current one, IPv6 is trying to solve that, or is solving that with a lot more IP addresses. So right now, if you wanted to start doing IPv6 on AWS, we support so-called dual stack mode on VPC. So you can run both IPv4 and IPv6 in parallel, which then enables your EC2 machines to get IPv6 addresses. And also many of our other services, like the load balancing service, does support IPv6 for the application load balancer and the network load balancer. You can already today start creating towards internet native IPv6 services, which is pretty great, considering that we already have some requirements, for example, coming from Apple, that all iOS applications must support IPv6 only mobile networks as well. So here you could start creating your services that fully support these mobile networks that are IPv6 only. Of course, those mobile networks today do support connection from IPv6 environments to IPv4 environments. So it's not a hard stop for you. You can still continue running your applications or backends on AWS on IPv4 only. But yeah, you can start today already implementing IPv6 services, including even CloudFront. So CloudFront, our CDN, does support IPv6 as well.
Thank you for that, Toni. And that was the last question we had time for today. So I want to thank our experts for being on. Thanks a lot for being here, answering questions. And if you didn't get your question answered, there is a way to schedule a one-on-one meeting with AWS experts. If you go to the landing page for this show, you can actually schedule a one-on-one meeting. I'll post that link in the chat as well. And with that, this was the last episode of the season, but don't worry, we'll be back after the summer. So thanks once again to our experts. Thanks to all the viewers, and have a great summer, everyone.